Well, in a lot of ways, it never seemed like this day would come, but it did. This is our journey, Katie's journey in Deep Brain Stimulator. Back in November of 2020, we went down to Birmingham to be assessed as to whether or not we should be part of a study there at UAB in regards to the Deep Brain Stimulator and the programming that they would use in one of the particular stimulators. I think it's Boston Scientific that crafted that device, but the study is actually for the programming itself of the device. Here you see Chris, one of the lead researchers. He is dotting Katie up. You may have seen some of the technology that Hollywood uses to do motion capture, and Dan here would use, I can't remember how many cameras they had around the studio there, and they would capture those pinpoint dots on Katie, and he would use those to craft a three-dimensional kind of a skeleton. There you see her raising her arms. He takes those dots and he connects some of those, and remember that old song, your knee dot's connected to the ankle dot? Well, that's what he's doing there, and he forms that 3D skeleton, and that would help him as they did different tests that day to capture Katie's motion, how her body was lined up. They would use that information to not only do the assessment, but also as a record of how everything was going, how everything worked, and this was all without Katie being on any medication. So you'll notice here in a moment some of those tremors being present. They'd have her walk down this strip on the floor, and then they'd have her walk backwards. This particular test was a pin placement test. If you've ever been to Cracker Barrel and put the little T's in the triangle, well, this wasn't a triangle, but 9 pins, and you put them in and then take them back out as the test progressed. I put her on this really cool dual treadmill it would move just a little bit, see how her balance was. Sit her in a chair and she would touch dots on the floor. You'll see more of that in just a moment. But all of these things, all of these assessments to see whether or not she qualified. And then she ended up being accepted into the study, which has a lot of benefits for us, but hopefully also some benefits for those who will follow after us in the future. Fast forward to the 1st of February, and before we get there, we start to take steps to get ready. As you see, Katie keeps shortening her hair length in a matter of control to prepare as much as we could for the surgery. And then, of course, some of you know, and as the ladies of our church have done, worn hats on several Sundays just to show their love for Katie and support for her. We finally shaved everything off, got her ready. Had a lot of practice myself, so it was easy to do, but she was dressed and ready for surgery. There you see the halo they put on her to keep everything where it needed to be as they got her into that theater and that operation. It was quite a long operation and a long process, but they would install that Deep Brain Stimulator, and you see there the shadow of it on the screen, and that's if you were looking at her from her left side. Here you see from the front, the shadow of it is kind of harder to see there. And then if you were looking up through her feet to the middle of her brain, there's a small dot right there kind of toward the center, and that is the tip of that electrode. And we had a night in the hospital there, and but eventually she would get to feeling a little bit better, and we made our way back home. And then that Friday went in and had the battery pack, kind of like a pacemaker for those who know, implanted there on her left kind of shoulder area. Now we come to February the 23rd, and we go back for programming of the stimulator. And this would be a pretty long morning too. They would do a series of, I believe, 5 tests, and that included getting up out of a chair and walking, turning around, going back and sitting down. They would have her multiple times walk the the little pathway back and forth, just to see how her gait is, and also to time that. And so that gives them a chronological, chronograph measurement. Then they would have her stand as still as she could and look at the wall. They would have her do this toe tapping test, and you have to touch each square in sequence and go from 1 to 9 and then back to 1. And it sounds easier, I think, than it is in practice to do. But we did that, and then the pegboard that I mentioned just a moment ago, she did that as well. And again, all of this was measured without her being on her meds, to see how quickly she could accomplish the task and proficiently. And then after these tests, then it was time for programming, and Melissa here is assessing her movements, and they have that yoke around Katie's neck, and on it is a device that communicates with the stimulator controller battery pack. And Katie could tell when they turned it on, and you'll see different effects it'll have as Melissa adjusted the device. You can even see the change in the way in movement. Okay, there are possible side effects to the strength of the device being turned on, and so that's what they're trying to find, those balances. This was test 1, and as you can see, Katie's not moving as much, still some tremoring going on, but they would put her through that same series of 5 tests now with this first programmed area, first direction coming out of the stimulator, and go through all 5 of those tests again. And then we'd come to program 2, which did not seem as effective, just from my perspective. And well, as soon as Melissa would turn it off, Katie's tremors would come right back, because again, she's not medicated during this whole procedure. But again, it would have a different effect. And so there are 10, again, of these settings that they were adjusting and manipulating. And after each setting, they would go through that same battery of tests again and assess. So a lot of stuff Katie did that morning, and a lot of walking and a lot of trying, with various levels of stimulation, various directions. And again, testing all that. And then something that's hard to explain is the emotional aspect of this procedure. And Melissa's doing this programming in a very specific way because we're measuring everything for the sake of the test. But clinically, it happened a lot quicker. This was the 3rd test. And not only did it stop the tremors, but just Katie felt a whole lot more relaxed. And so emotionally, it's just it's an overwhelming experience. You come to this point, and just to not need to move. Here she's trying to stand still, but again, just kind of overwhelmed by the sense of the experience of being relaxed and not moving. And I was ready to take her home then. That sounds good. All right, let's wrap it up. But Katie is a trooper, and we're going to do what she is supposed to do to help with the test and the study. And so we go from that program, and everything's just working great. And then we move on to the next program, which is going to be a little bit different experience. As Melissa turns the stimulator off and on, you see Katie's body immediately respond. And then as I ramp the power up, you'll notice Katie's movement's like just having a tough time with it, but also getting dyskinesia, which is different than the tremoring. It's slow but long muscle movements, and this test is kind of hard. It was hard for me to watch. I didn't struggle as bad because I'm standing there or sitting there in whatever position trying to video what's going on. And I think that probably was a good distraction for me, as opposed to having to simply watch what was happening happen. But it's you go from what we were just experiencing with her being able to stand still, and here she just can't. And again, the emotional swing of it all. And Katie just keeps on going, keeps on working through it, and goes through all 5 of those tests all over again. And you can even see Chris here move position just to stay closer because she was struggling walking. And it's hard to explain how Katie can go from, we're walking, doing fine, and then almost not able to walk in just a short amount of time. And so but again, the part of what is so amazing about the brain and how it responds to the medication and then also to the stimulator. And we do those tests again. So let's end that program. We move on to the next program. And I've sped most of these up now because again, it was a process of program. Put your shoes back on now. So do the toe tapping, do the walking, do the pins. Now take your shoes off and stand still. All right, let's change the program. And so we would. And you just got various results every time they changed the way that transmitter was communicating with the brain. Different directions, different levels, and then different intensities. And then more tests. And so you do the tests, sit back down, reprogram, and then you do some more tests. As hard as it was to watch some of these, there was no time that Katie ever expressed me any pain. It just, it's hard when your body wants to do something other than what you want it to do, and that's part of this disease and part of the Parkinson's problem is that your body does what it gets the signal to do, which may not be what you want it to do, or maybe you want it to do something and it's not going to do it that way, and these folks understand that, and so again, it's a process, and it's a part of that study. And part of studies is you have to measure and measure and measure and measure. And so it was a long day, long process. But overall, it was a good process. Now Melissa's showing us the remote control, and this is what we use. Katie can hold that as long as it's in, I think, within 1 arm's length of her battery control unit. It communicates with it, and she can adjust the program and change the intensity of the stimulation that is happening. And that's going to become very important over the next few hours. Now she's exhausted at this point. She's just taken her first dose of medication over the past day, and so we're programmed. She's doing great, and even on the ride home, she sits and she's still. She falls asleep in the car, and that may be the first time in a couple of years that I've watched her be able to do that and not jerk back awake, and so get her back home, and she rested a little bit that afternoon and that evening, and was able to sleep like she hadn't slept in probably a year or more, all night, and not waking up. She didn't wake up till her alarm went off, and so what a blessing. And then the next day comes, and she takes her medicine that morning. She's got some tremors going on. The tremors subside, but then dyskinesia starts, and so that issue she had there with that test 4 of moving, that wasn't quite that bad, but still pretty severe. And what that means is the stimulator and the medicine together are too much, and so now we're in the process of trying to balance the medication and the stimulation, and that's going to be a process. It's going to take time, and it is frustrating. It was a little discouraging after such a great evening to then you're facing another day and another series of problems. We actually had to turn the stimulator off once and just let the medicine kind of run out first. But everything is getting better, and the promise is there, and the hope is there. And so we'll give you another update as we find out more and as we learn more about what's going on through this journey. We hope that you're blessed. Thank you for your prayers and support and love. Hope that you also are blessed.